Good day to you. This is Anagalactic broadcasting to you on a Monday, the 9th day of June. We have a very special presentation for you today. If you have not been tuning in to the last few recent videos, don't worry. All of my videos are self-contained. I will be referring to what came in the prior couple of videos, but I will have a full summary explanation. The reason you may be interested in that is because you may want the details that I won't be able to provide in this video, because we are now going to solve today, you and I, the most difficult problem that's ever faced humanity. This is, of course, contextualized because humanity is a rather vast enterprise or game. And we're talking about science, but we're not talking about industrial science. We're not talking about technology. We are not talking about government programs where they breed mathematicians over a period of generations so as to have, I'll just say, a brain trust for exploits into outer space and the discovery of new weapons. Those two enterprises are extremely closely related. The search for new weaponry is going on under the dirt of Switzerland as we speak. A brand new giant hadron collider at the expense of hundreds of billions of dollars is being built in Switzerland to replace the outdated, outmoded $10 billion Hadron Collider. This saps the strength of the Earth. This is a satanic enterprise. So we don't have anything to do with that. So we're not interested in the standard model of particle physics, which is psychotic, nor are we interested in games to figure out the universe, which is simply a diversion so that you'll go along peaceably enough with the Hadron Collider enterprise and the outer space enterprise. We do get benefits. The great creator is quite merciful. He does allow his corrupt minions to continue to destroy the earth and to destroy humanity. And of course, that's probably one reason why you personally hate God. I'm here to tell you that you're wrong to do that, but you have your reasons. It's because you have been preached a false God, and you've seen through it, haven't you? And now you've thrown the baby out with the bathwater, as the old adage goes, and you'll have nothing to do with religion any further. Good for you. Over here, you'll see a diagram which I have been using over the past few lectures, although they haven't been in sequence, because I keep returning to this. The two arrows, one of which is vertically oriented, and the other one which is horizontally oriented, represent two infinities. We're going to get into that today. In solving the greatest problem ever to face humanity in the upper echelons of science, where wise men tend to work, to solve that, one of the aspects of the solution will be to catch up with what science actually knows. Science is progressive and it is cumulative. It accumulates knowledge. We now have the technology, which is being used for good as well as evil, but 99% evil. Wise men are only concerned with what is good. We're not interested in complex analysis or calculus integrations or derivations. That's for fools who just want to survive, and they're willing to sell their soul in order to gain a few more days, hours, years, or decades on this doomed planet. If you have not dealt with that aspect of reality, I have nothing whatsoever to say to you. But for those of you who may be interested, either because you are on the side of good rather than evil, or because you're fascinated with the good, you're tuned in to the right station. I am the only YouTube platform that preaches the truth, and it is preaching. We're not interested in games here. We're not interested in finding out the secrets of the planets or the stars or the galaxies or anything in the universe. We couldn't care less about the electron or proton, or certainly the stupid photon. So why have I given 1,000 video lectures on just those topics? It's because it is the only good game in town. And now I'm just going to recap the reason for my assertion that what I'm about to show you today is not only the solution to all the scientific problems, it's also a key to perception. So the purpose of this video is multifold. And from this point forward, the bracketing information is done. I always do this so you know what you're in for. This will be, to a certain degree, mathematics, which may frighten you. It should, but it's not going to be confusing mathematics. It's just going to be what the universe says. And it's turned out that that's just been a very difficult perception for reasons which I've gone into in extraordinary detail in certain segments over the past 1,000 video lectures over the past 3 years. Now, I prefer to call these presentations, but of course it includes a lecture with the presentation. I personally prefer the term presentation, but I often mix in the word lecture, just so you know there are two aspects, visual and audio. It's interesting that in the holy book of the Apocalypse, the last transmission of heaven to earth, unless you include the transmission to Muhammad, which I do, but leaving that aspect out, the last transmission in the main lineage was the book of the Apocalypse, which is sometimes called Revelation. The word itself in Greek means the tearing aside of the veil. I am the foremost expert on that book on earth today, as well as being the discoverer of all the secrets that Einstein and Dirac could not attain, and which has driven to madness everyone who's lived since. So I will cure that madness, but not on behalf of the goddamned government. It's on the behalf of humans. This has to do with your visual perceptual system. I will be transforming your consciousness if you're willing to go along with that aspect. It will transform your consciousness. And as I have said in at least 4 prior videos over the past 3 years, for you to understand what I'm about to present to you, it doesn't matter if you're blind. And I wish to quote for you something from the famous movie Little Big Man, starring Dustin Hoffman as well as Chief Lodgeskins and quite a few others. Faye Dunaway was in there too. Little Big Man is an excellent book. It was written, I believe, in the 1930s. It might have been later than that. But Little Big Man made quite a splash in its day and was turned into a movie by Hollywood, which I think is an extraordinarily good movie. But Chief Lodgeskins is a real chief. He's actually a Native American, and he plays the role in the movie, which basically he actually is that person. And he's a wise man who treats Dustin Hoffman, who is Little Big Man, as his grandson, which is quite a high honor. So he's toward the end of the movie, Chief Lodgeskins is rather traumatized, as were all of the Native Americans, these being Cheyenne Indians. They were all rather traumatized by their treatment at the hands of the U.S. military, which I think you're at least somewhat familiar with. One of the most brutal, disgusting stories, which really probably confirm in the eyes of most angels that this planet should just be blown to smithereens. Don't worry, that's just about to happen. So we're here just before the explosion. Ha ha ha! But what I wanted to say to you is, as he, that is Chief Lodgeskins, is encountering the military incursions of the United States government upon on their lives, he's rather traumatized. You know, everyone gets rubbed out. The ones he loves are rubbed out. The ones he's protected all of his life in the name of heaven, they're just being rubbed out, rubbed out, rubbed out, and now it's the end, and they're all going to be wiped out completely. So Dustin Hoffman comes into the teepee to say, "Grandfather, we've got to get out of here. Here come the cavalry." And Grandfather says, "I prefer to stay in the circle." He means the teepee. He likes the circle. So do I. "I will stay in the circle." And Dust says, "No, we've got to run for it. We only have seconds." Chuck. Whack! Off goes someone's arm or whatever. Here they come. So it's quite a high-tension moment in that movie. And it just comes about that he says, "I am not blind, my son. My eyes can see. But the channel of light will not go to the center of my spirit anymore." And so effectively he's saying he's blind even though his eyes work. And so he can't see, but it's kind of weird. Well, that's a spiritual man for you. You can't always understand what he's saying, but you kind of do. But Grandfather, what about the great circle of water which encompasses all the rivers? The bigger circle is in the middle of the stream out here. And Grandfather says, I think you're right." And he starts to rise, and so little big man leads him out, and there's these horses charging by, just chopping down women and men. And Grandfather says, I will go to the circle of the waters. Why didn't I think of that? And he's just laughing. And so he saves his own life by believing that the great circle that he needs to be inside of is in the middle of the stream, and then they get away. So that's a little big man, a little vignette out of that marvelous movie. I've seen it 3 times and read the book. It's just so wonderful, although, of course, it's also frightening. It's traumatizing. Once you see that movie, if that's the first time you've seen the decimation of innocent people on this earth, why, you're suicidal. You just want to end your life. I mean, why am I even here if this is what happens here? This should never happen. Well, billions of people have been chopped down by other humans. So this is a satanically run planet. Where does that leave the Great Spirit? Oh, that depends on your religion, little darling. I can't help you there. Okay, so today we're going to talk about that great circle, which is not a straight line, and there are only 2 objects in geometry. There is the straight line, which was discovered by Euclid. That is the way we phrase it, although that may seem a little strange to you. I suppose it would. So just accepting the conventions of language, we assign to Euclid the axiomatization of linear space. Nobody denies that in upper echelon science, so I'm not preaching out of class here to you. So there is the circle. What do we know about the circle? Nothing. Nothing. And the reason the line and the circle are the only 2 objects in geometry is because in order to understand geometry at all, you have to match the universe to your perceptual space. Space here is being used in its abstract sense of what's inside your fucking noggin. So what do you have in there? Physiologists are now able to tell us what really we already knew, but now we are able to prove what we say as scientists. You see, listen very carefully and pay attention. you see a flat screen image. Flat. That is called a plane. And what you see at any moment is a plane, and that's all you see, is a plane. Now, given that fact, that is your perceptual space. But there's more. And I'm sure you realize there's more, and I'm glad you haven't turned this off in disgust because of my abject ignorance. Because you know there is such a thing as depth vision. Depth vision. How does that differ from planar vision? Essentially, it doesn't, because everything you see is planar. You do not have depth vision. But you do, but you don't. But you do, but you don't. Do you or don't you? It depends on how smart you are. Now, the way we see is already determined, and I'll give it away for you so you don't go crazy. Yes, you do see depth vision. You do see depth. But how do you see depth? If you look at a photograph, you cannot see depth. You interpret it. But if you're watching a moving screen such as this that you're looking at now, you're looking at a flat plane. So if you put your hand up, you can convince yourself that what you're looking at is a flat screen image. That is the plane. So you're interpreting the plane. So how does that differ from a photograph? Think for 3 seconds and then give your best answer. What's the difference between a photograph and a movie? Movie, move, moving. It's moving, okay? That's how you see depth. It's from motion. It's from motion. Wow. What can you say about motion? 2 things. Time. Time is not involved in a photograph. You may realize there's a footnote to that. Because when you look at a photograph, it's persisting over time, right? Because time is moving even though the photo isn't. But it stays static in its frame. It's static in your frame of reference. But if you're looking at a moving screen, which you are now, that is, things are changing on the flat screen, well, that provides motion. And that provides a perception of time. And it's only through the perception of time that you have depth perception. So that is the relationship, in one sense, between space and time, right? Okay. All right. Now, in order to solve the most difficult problem that has ever faced humanity, is it is completely unsolved. Let us see if we can state that so that we know what it is we want to solve. Because according to the Polya method, this is a Stanford professor who wrote a book which went into more than 13 editions, I think it's actually way more than that, called How to Solve a Problem. A Stanford professor telling you and me how to solve a problem. Now, I was in Carlmont High School, just 10 miles from Stanford, when Polya was teaching, and this book was already world famous. Do you think we even heard about it in our high school? No. And that tells you something about your United States government scholastic system. It's a prison. Okay? I know that. I'm just sharing a fact with you. But Polya came up with a method of approach to solving a problem. This is using rational logic, which is probably the best formulation ever, although I've improved it with a few details. So the way to solve the most difficult problem this ever faced humanity, which Einstein could not solve. He died frustrated. Paul probably the greatest mathematician of the 20th century, except for John Horton Conway, also died frustrated, enormously frustrated, because their mathematical system was incapable of addressing the problem at all. But for you and I to approach that same problem, which has balked, baffled, and defeated every one of our greatest minds of all time, we are going to have to state the problem clearly, because that is the first step in the Polya method. Now, I've amended that because Polya left out something. Science is progressive. Polya did his job, I'm doing mine, but this is a tremendous improvement on his technique. It's a method. In order to address a problem that you have not solved, but you must solve, you need to solve it, you want to solve it for whatever reason, but you need to solve it. You've decided that in your own mind, and now you're engaged. It's going to engage your whole being, depending on how difficult the problem is, really how important the problem is, as you perceive it. I've perceived this problem pretty much the same way that all the other scientists have. But what is it? Okay, well, it can be stated in several ways because there are several aspects. It is a problem in physics. And you may already be aware, because you may already have your preferences in how to really get excited about what just baffles the living fuck out of your physicists. Well, that's exciting. That keeps you sane in an insane world, because it's fun to watch smart people getting their asses kicked by the universe. That makes you feel better about yourself. I don't recommend that, but I do it too, so I can't point the finger. We're all going insane because of the massacre of the Indians, for one thing, but now it's the massacre of the Palestinians, and within a few months it'll be the massacre of the Iranian people. But when that happens, that'll begin a process that you will not want to be alive to witness. All right. So what is this tremendous problem? Well, you may have heard of the quantum paradox, or of course you've heard of quantum mechanics. Can you define what quantum mechanics is? Well, if you could, you'd be the first man ever to define what quantum mechanics is. It has no definition. That's the problem. This is called a paradox, but it goes much deeper, and now I'm going to explain to you from my own perspective what the actual problem is. But remember, this is multi-layered. You may have heard of quantum gravity. That's a misnomer. What's being sought is the quantum of gravity. So that's one aspect of the problem, called the unification problem. The unification of electrodynamics with a force in the universe that simply won't conform to electrodynamics. That's called gravity. Completely off the charts. Nobody has ever understood gravity. I hope I don't need to remind you that I do understand it, and I have got the solution. But in order to get at the solution to the greatest problem of all time, baffling in the extreme, nothing like it, I'm going to show you the right way to perceive the problem so you can define it best. All right? And this is going out on a limb, but I happen to know from the other side of the mirror, so to speak, what's the right way to perceive the quantum paradox. All right. What is being sought really is a measurement of the smallest units of anything. That could be time, that could be space, it could be energy, it could be a lot of things. But it's the smallest unit. You've heard of the Planck scale or the Planck unit. There are several Planck units. I'm not sure you're aware of that, but now you are. That would be the smallest measurable unit in any system. For distance, that would be the Planck length, which has been defined. And I can tell you, it's actually been defined correctly. We actually have all the answers. We do know what the quantum of gravity is. Well, when I say we do, I do. I'm part of we, and I can see the quantum of gravity. I'll tell you that before the end of this presentation, But I want to show you the other side of that same problem, and then I'll also show you that they are the same problem. Really remarkable. And what is the source of my insight? What are my credentials for having insights that are beyond that of Einstein, Dirac, or Feynman, or anyone else? It's because I discovered intrinsic geometry, which defines light speed. So, what we're approaching now is the plane. And over here you'll see a planar diagram. That means you're using your visual perceptual system, which is a flat screen image. Let me remind you of that. So when you look at this diagram over here, you can directly perceive anything in your extended visual space, but on a projection. That is a fixed image. That's a photograph, not a movie. In fact, I'll set that in motion for you so you can see it as a movie. My God. I swear, in my lectures, I very often achieve an insight while I'm talking, because this is all brand new. This has all been developed just within the past 3 years in my little studio. So let's get back on track. We need to state the problem. To begin to solve it, you have to state it. That's so important. It's very often left out. So to state the problem is such a profound step that by doing so correctly, that is completely, you very often either get the answer or you're certainly on the right track to the answer. But if you don't define the problem as best as possible, you're going to go wrong. You may still get your solution. That is still possible. But you want an economic solution, something fast. You know, we all agree with that. We don't want to take forever to get the answer. So what is the problem? All right, you may know that the universe is filled with light. That's a reasonable statement. I'm not trying to be philosophical or even religious, but I mean, but the universe is filled with light. And so the sun gives off light. That's a typical example of a luminous object. It's a sphere that gives off light. So how does it do that? Science is fairly well aware of the mechanics of the generation of light from a solar body called a star. So that's one source of light. It's not the only source of light, but it's the main source of light, and it's the only source of light in the solar system. That's fair to state, but there's a footnote to everything in physics, okay? So I'm trying to go as fast as I can, but not leave anything out. All right. So what about light? Well, it has a fixed speed, correct? That has been challenged. And actually, it's quite an interesting statement. Because does light actually have a speed? Well, actually it does. And you can watch a presentation by Veritasium, a very famous YouTube presenter, whom I think is pretty good. But one of his videos is on how to measure the speed of light, and I strongly recommend that video, but I'll summarize it here. The speed of light cannot be measured in just one direction. Although you can estimate it I'm trying to remember the name of the scientist. Römer? Was it Römer? I may be getting his name wrong. But there was a man who lived a few centuries ago, well, a couple of centuries ago, who measured the speed of light based on the transit of Jupiterian satellites around Jupiter. And the reason he was able to measure the speed of light that way is worth looking into. I can't go into it now because it's quite an interesting but technical. He got very close to the exact speed of light. He was very close. But now with recent innovations and technology, we're able to measure the speed of light almost exactly. Enough to be able to state that we might as well just conventionalize an absolute speed. That has been done. It was done in 1966, where the old definition of the speed of light was transformed forever. It will never be changed. I'm not saying this is good or right, but it is practical. So the exact speed of light is 299 million. Now we're talking about meters. So the distance metric is in the numerator, and the temporal metric is in the denominator. So the number is actually a two-component number, and that will be an intrinsic part of this presentation, that the speed of light is not a linear number. But it's always stated as if it were a linear number, and there's a serious mistake behind doing that. Albert Einstein actually discovered what that mistake was. You cannot just say that the speed is 1. It's 1 second. Well, can you define a second? No. Time cannot be linearized. But we imagine that it can be, and let's just go along with the presumption that time can be measured. This is the problem that Poincaré and Einstein dealt with at the turn of the century on behalf of the train scheduling in Europe, where the clocks had to be synchronized. Both Einstein and Poincaré were immensely fascinated with that synchronization problem. I think I need say no more. That leads into a lot of interesting Gedankenexperimenten. But to get back to the speed of light, it's 299,798,400, well, it's about 300 million meters per second. That's well within 1%. So you might as well just say it's 300 million meters per second. That sure would be a lot more convenient, wouldn't it? You can't, because the definition of the second is fixed for all time. Is that reasonable? You could say yes and you could say no. But what is the definition of a second? Do you know? There are two definitions. One of them is kind of crazy. And that's the current definition of the second. It has to do with the superfine transition scheduling of energy at the subatomic level in a cesium isotope. And that's called by a certain name. You've heard of the atomic clock. It's a cesium clock. And all of your GPS satellites have a cesium clock aboard, which does not tick at the same rate as a cesium clock on Earth. So how in the world, or how in the universe, could you say that you know the definition of a second when it differs even within the solar system? This is the precious lab cat on which this whole operation basically depends. Without this cat's love, I would be more out of my mind than I already am. Okay, there's the lab cat. She's going to her perch. You'll probably see her jump up there in a moment. Unless she decides, as it appears she is, to just sit on the keyboard. And that's her right. I have the keyboard in my lap, so if I do need it, she's my beautiful girl. I'm so glad you came to see it. Oh, you're my precious. Okay, so what is the definition of a second? Well, if you go back to 1966, the definition of a second is derived from the orbit of the Earth around the Sun. And I probably shouldn't say orbit. Or no, that is the right word, orbit. It's the word revolution that gives us problem. When you say revolution, that really should refer to a solid object, but it doesn't always. Orbit is unambiguous, so for once I chose the right word. The orbit of the Earth around the Sun is, of course, on a circle. Isn't it? Oh, yes, it is. It's on a circle, so it's not linear. It's not linear. But we can't do anything with a circle. We don't know how to deal with a circle. Mathematics and physics is just absolutely helpless with the circle. And we've been helpless with curvature for 2,500 years. I will now solve that for you. But in order to get to the solution, first we're trying to state what the problem is. And we're approaching it from the point of view of a photon, which is the correct way, in my opinion, to approach the quantum mechanical paradox. What is a photon? You may have heard that that's the beginning of quantum mechanics. Is that question cannot be answered. It's as if there's no such thing as a photon. It's as if there's no such thing as light, because science cannot define what light is. Now, a man named Maxwell was able to show that light is an electromagnetic phenomenon, and from his researches, he was able to prove that light is a two-component phenomenon, which means that directly states that your linear number system will fail to apprehend it, which is the case. Now, your physicists haven't realized that. I'm giving you a statement that they would just disagree with me. To a duel, they would want to kill me because I'm denying the validity of their very existence, because they believe the linear mathematics system is divine, which is strange because they explicitly do not believe in a designer. So this is satanic. And it does go that far, but we're not going to touch that today because I don't want to frighten you. Frighten you to the point of laughing me to scorn and turning your heel on me, you juvenile delinquent. So pay attention. I'm not trying to hurt you, but I am trying to get you to see something that no man has ever seen before except me. So that does make a man a little elliptical, I'd have to put it. Certainly has been my experience. Now here you see a brand new knot that I invented recently. This is a variation of the double Windsor knot, a necktie knot. It's not very good, but I'm still working on various aspects of knots. I don't have a tie clip because it just magically disappeared. I can't find it, so that's a modified double Windsor knot, which in this reverse image I'm unable to coordinate with my hands. Okay, so there it is. For whatever it's worth, that's my double Windsor knot. Thank you very much. Turn this up here so we get some color. Now, the constancy of the speed of light is based partially on the definition of the second. So what is it? It's a specific fractional unit of the orbit period of the Earth around the Sun, which using a calculus derivative can be computed to, as every calculus textbook states, as close as you like. I mean, the hell with what the universe actually says. With the calculus, you can get it close enough to what you, as a worm, would like. So that's what the calculus does for you. It's really good for engineering, not really good for studying reality. Okay, so there we go. Hey, I like talking to you in a much more pleasant, choked voice. Why a man would tie a noose around his neck, I try to go along with the crowd, but only in the indecencies, I guess. Anyhow, so there's our definition of the speed of light. It's an exact number on the unity of the time metric. So the second is the quantum of time in this system. Now, it's not really the quantum of time, it's the index of time. For explanation, you're going to have to go back to my prior videos, but I'm giving you explicitly accurate terms. The reason they're beyond you, perhaps, is because of your education system being deficient and actually controlled so that you won't know certain things. But I'm here to expose what you have to know to solve this problem, which we haven't gotten to yet. All of this circumlocution, as you may think, is absolutely necessary to get at the statement of the problem itself, which is extraordinarily difficult in this case because it's a paradox. And a paradox is the strangest form of conundrum, what otherwise would be called a puzzle or riddle. There's all kinds of... Oh my God, this is horrific. Oh, hey, now, almost got it. Oh, yeah, there we go. Look at that, man. Oh, now I look like some kind of scientific priest. Well, I'm not sure I'm ready for that. I don't want that. Anyhow, that's the best I can do with my modified double Windsor knot. Okay. So we have the constancy of light speed, which for the knots we're just going to accept because all of science accepts it. I'm not saying that it's correct. I'm saying that it is accepted, that the speed of light is constant. So what is the speed of light? It's a certain number of units measured in meters in proportion to 1 second of time. Okay, so it is a 2-component number. So it's a rate. It's a proportion. And that proportion, as you know, can be inverted. In other words, the number of seconds that elapse in a distance transit of a photon. So if the photon begins at a star, takes time to travel, and arrives at your telescope, now you've captured the photon. Now this, of course, would be mini photons, because one photon you're not going to be able to do much with. But with a telescope, you collect those photons, which are all coming from the same source. You're pointing the telescope in a linear direction. And the photons stream into your telescope by magic. That's what we're getting to, is how the photon does that. And you can say that it covered a certain amount of distance. Well, what is that distance? It would be a certain number of quadrillion or quintillion or sextillion or just indeterminate number of billions or trillions or quadrillions of some unit of distance. And so now you have a number. How do you know that? How do you know that it covered that much distance? Well, that's quite a story called the story of the cosmic distance ladder. But essentially, you know that that distance is typically measured in years. It takes a certain number of years. Well, that doesn't sound like distance. That's because it's not. But isn't it? They're correlated on a constant of the universe. So when you say that a photon covered a certain amount of distance, that is linearly correlated with a certain amount of time. And you can say it either way, because if you say it's 4 light years away, you set a rate. You could say it's 4 years away, but that's not accurate because you're not saying years of what. You could say it's a certain number of meters away, but even that is incorrect because in the time it took for those photons to get to your telescope, that star has moved. Alpha Centauri, which would be the 4-year one, or Proxima Centauri. In 4 years, it didn't just sit there like it's in a photograph. You took a snapshot, and now you're trying to analyze it as if it were a photograph. Well, then Albert Einstein came along and just pushed over that apple cart forever. And science has been absolutely confused out of its mind ever since. The secret to seeing through what Albert Einstein showed us is that there is a relationship between linear spatial separation, which is how science does everything. Linear spatial separation, that's distance or length. They're identical. 3 synonyms: length, distance, but the correct term is linear spatial separation. Linear. Linear. You've heard of linear algebra, right? Yes. It's worshipped by your goddamn mathematicians. It's linear. Well, is that valid? It had been up until Albert Einstein, and now we know that that's incomplete. That you're never getting an exact distance to anything, not even on Earth. But it fools us on Earth, because things don't move that quickly while you're measuring them for you to realize that they are moving while you measure them. And so you're not getting an exact measurement on linear spatial separation. That is forever impossible. There is no such thing as an exact measure of linear spatial separation. So can we actually say that light has a constant speed? If you say speed, no. That's not the best way to say it. You're trying to get an exact rate. Well, Newton showed us how to get an exact rate out of a two-component relation. That is, in this case, distance and time. You used the calculus. That's the whole reason for the calculus. Let's make sure we state that clearly, because there are billions upon billions of pages that have been written since the time of Newton, particularly in the 20th century, about the calculus. What is it? Well, first of all, it's cheating, and I'll show that to you. But it's a necessary cheat, for the same reason that the Greeks didn't understand the circle and nobody has ever understood curvature. Now we turn to this diagram, where I'm going to explain to you what you see here, beginning with that curved line, which is not linear. There is linearity shown here. Actually, 2 linearities are displayed here. And the reason for the 2 linearities is that's how we are able to parameterize the plane, is on a horizontal axis combined with a vertical conjugal axis. And that parameterizes the plane with squares. Squares. Well, that's not curved, is it? That's the quantum paradox. So now to translate that paradox to the flight of the photon, where that photon began was in an evolute of an electronic shell where a quantum of energy detached and went into free fall. So a photon is a free-falling particle through a part of space that we can't see. The photon then traverses space and must intersect with your telescope. It has no choice, because the free-falling photon from any atom in the universe just falls to the edge. It's under the guidance of centrifugal force. So that's the nature of the travel of the photon. The photon is not fired out of a cannon. That's not where it gets its speed. It's not Newtonian speed. It's a rate of transmission. All right, so the photon does appear to travel as a spherical wavefront. That's been known since the time of Christian Huygens, who was contemporary with, but just slightly before Newton. They did live contemporaneously, but Newton, as far as I know, was unaware of Huygens' work, which is remarkable to me that such a well-respected scientist, and rightly so, Sir Isaac Newton, would not mention Christian Huygens' research into wavefront dynamics. Well, part of the reason may be is that Newton completely disagreed with any form of wave mechanics. He was unaware of wave mechanics. He thought that photons were corpuscles. That means particles. Was he right? I'll show you that he was right, but it's superpositional. And that's the nature of what we're going to learn today, is how to see superpositionally so you can solve the greatest problem that's ever faced the rational mind of man, blueprinted in the image of God's logic system, the logic system that God uses to create the universe and keep it going, is exactly what we're trying to match our minds to. Well, you can't until you think more like the Creator. And that's where it gets religious, and that's where it gets spooky, and that's 50 minutes. So I'm going to curtail this until I get some refreshment, some extremely cold water. I'm dripping sweat, and you and I are going to find out the collapse of the wave function. And just to introduce you to the next most important video that I've ever released to date, will be to describe for the third or fourth time, but actually I have more information now because I keep getting blessed by heaven. This will go on forever, I pray, that I am on a runaway discovery vector that goes in several directions and now encompasses more than my brain is capable of handling without starting to use the 9/10 of the brain that is never used. I'm starting to use that now because I need that power and storage, just like a CPU needs more storage and more throughput. But the collapse of the wave function, just so you know, from an authoritative source, and this is coming directly from Paul Dirac, my teacher, what Paul Dirac said that he himself could not solve, and it drove him to the brink of something, because all he wanted was to find out the collapse of the wave function. And he said, and he stated right to his dying day and wrote a whole book about it, to get the quantum answers that you want, that everyone wants. Einstein wanted, Bohr wanted, Heisenberg, Schrödinger, Feynman, everybody to the present day. It's the problem that has to be solved before science can restart. So this is the restarting of physics, if it can be done. Well, Paul Dirac couldn't do it, but he said, to get the answer, all you need is to solve the collapse of the wave function. I did. I solved it. And it's right here. That will show you the collapse of the wave function. It's a corkscrew collapse in spherical space. That may sound preposterous. Remember, I must remind you again, whatever the answer is, it's not only going to be outrageous, it's not only going to stretch your mind to its breaking point, it's got to be much more powerful even than that. So I got the solution, but it took me down to the basic definition of what is a number, what is a line, and what is a circle, what is a sphere, what is motion, what is energy, what is angular momentum, what is magnetism, what is gravity, what is the proton, what is the electron, and what I was originally looking for when I began studying this, what is the photon? Because you have to know what the photon is in order to understand the transmission of information throughout the universe. Because that's the only way we know about the universe at all, is by the transmission of light. So unless you know how that's done, you're going to be frustrated. Well, that's what everyone wants to know. Well, what they want to know has to do with bombs. I'm not interested in making a strong force bomb. That's why I'm very concerned about the government knowing what I will divulge. But The way the great creator set this up, evil has access to everything that righteousness has access to. I represent righteousness, but I'm in a sea of evil. I will tell the answer anyway. I don't care if it contributes to the destruction of the earth, because that's a foregone conclusion anyway, and I pray to heaven that I'm not held responsible for that in any way. I'm actually trying to give us what we need as righteous men before it's too late. I hope you tune in. We'll be back later. I need ice water like you wouldn't believe. Don't forget, I'm dying, and I will probably be dead by 2026. So just so you know, this is your last chance to get the answer to the secrets of the universe. So thank you for tuning in. Every single one of my viewers, it's about 15. As far as I know, I believe it's more. I've been told that it's a lot more. Because it's possible to disseminate videos from YouTube by downloading them and then distributing them privately. I encourage you to do that. Don't worry about my safety. I am not concerned about my safety. This only has to do with getting the answer so that you can see it. For what? I hope you have a reason for wanting to know. I can't guide you in that because you wouldn't want me to. But I'm telling you, you'd better figure it out, why you want to know this. I know my reason, but I can't tell you what your reason is. So if you just want to be entertained, that's fine, but I pity you. Stay tuned, though, because my goal ultimately is to transform your mind so that you're happier, that you're more wholesome, that you're happy, okay? Well, you're not going to be happy as you could be unless you know what's going to become of you after your last breath, okay? When your brain stops working and your consciousness is gone. Can you even imagine that? You may want to spend some time wondering about that. I am Islam. I could help you with that, but this is a science channel. It all blends together. I'm trying to make you see how it does all blend together. But without your complicity, my job is hopeless. So stay tuned. We'll be back with the collapse of the wave function and the quantum of gravity. Keep looking up. We'll be right back.